Hi, Paul Hefty here. I want to talk about Crisis Management 101. We'll start out using Penn State, a real life workshop, why this is important, what we can learn, and looking at then some different examples so that we can be proactive in our model for ethical decisions and in our crisis management. Let's take a look. All right, start out with a workshop right away. And the idea here is we've talked about in the course of continuous learning. So we'll do some crisis prep where we want to process, reflect, learn, and prepare. So we'll start out with real life scenario here at Penn State, the Sandusky Scandal, 2011. 3 things to ponder, and you want to write down your response. What impact did the Penn State athletic program scandal have on your definition of ethics? What would that scandal have? What impact does it have on your leadership philosophy? And what can we learn from it? So pause the video here and write down your quick responses to these. Please put something down on paper. It'll be good to use as we go forward. All right, the Sandusky scandal, with all of these things, we want to make sure, as I've said, we go back and do our homework and research it so we get the facts. Again, this happened in early November 2011. He was indicted on 52 counts of child molestation. So then in the fall of 2011, the Board of Trustees fired all 4 leaders here at Penn State. Graham Spanier, the president, Tim Curley, the AD, and Gary Schultz, the VP, plus Joe Paterno, the head football coach. In June then of 2012, Sandusky was convicted of the 45 counts of sex abuse. From there, Spanier, Curley, and Schultz were all charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and failure to report suspected child abuse related to the charges. Paterno was not charged, but was found responsible in the free report, which we'll get to. In July then of 2012, the NCAA imposed a $60 million fine, 4-year postseason ban, scholarship reductions, and then vacated victories from 98 to 2011. 2014 then on the timeline, the NCAA reversed its course and rescinded a lot of those penalties. In 2017 then, Spanier, the president, was found guilty on 1 count of child endangerment. Curley and Schultz pleaded guilty, and Paterno had passed away in 2012, therefore never being charged. Some verdict statements. Joe Paterno, Curley, and Schultz all stated, direct quotes, "We should have done more." FBI Director Louis Freeh, the Freeh report, quote, "Spanier, Schultz, Curley were the most powerful men who ran the Penn State University. Today they are convicted criminals. Joe Paterno's once iconic legacy is forever marred by his own decision to do nothing when he had the chance to make a real difference." The university statement, Penn State, after convictions was, quote, "The verdict, their words and pleas indicate a profound failure of leadership. We cannot undo the past, but we have rededicated ourselves in our university to act always with the highest integrity and affirming the shared values of the community." The judge in the sentencing had a couple statements. Quote, "Why Mr. Sandusky was allowed to continue the Penn State's facilities is beyond me." Judge stated, "All 3, Spanier, Schultz, and Curley, ignored the opportunity to put an end to Sandusky's crimes when they had a chance to do so." The judge also criticized the actions of former coach Joe Paterno. Quote, "Paterno could have made that phone call without so much as getting his hands dirty. Why he didn't is beyond me." So from the facts here, I want you to take and do a personal statement workshop, and pause the video here. As a leader, and you're going to be a Penn State grad, pretend you're speaking for the university as a future leader. What is your statement or your position on the scandal, if you're asked? What on the 3 past leaders of their guilty verdicts? On Joe Paterno leadership and your verdict of it? And then on the university. Just again, write these down. These are things that we can use, and I encourage you to add to your portfolio. All right, when we start to review here, why is this important in the crisis management to review and reflect? I'm not preaching here, but again, with 35 years of leadership experiences, I got a couple stories. September 11th, when the Twin Towers went down, I was coaching in Chicago as assistant coach, and the head coach at that time decided not to play a game on that Saturday. And again, that was a very negative reaction initially. As through time now, it's seen to be as a smart gesture. So again, when you're making decisions, you want to think about which side of history you want to be on, because you will be judged during, but you'll also be judged later. It's kind of what's your legacy. Also, a head coach resigned. I was the interim head coach and then not hired by the new head coach. How do you react to that situation? I'm a head coach and I have an athletic director asked to fire staff. It gets it to be a test. Where do you stand? Is it people first, or is it your position in place? At the time, I chose not to fire them, and it was a great decision. We had great success moving forward. Crisis stories. You deal with all of this, and I'm sure you have in personal life. As a leader, it becomes a little more complicated. I've had young players that and parents dealing with suicide issues. Had a family leaving after a ball game in a plane crash, having to deal with the student athlete dealing with deaths in the family there. Obviously, cancer, it's been part of my family, but also with others. I had a young player who was a parent after graduating, died of a heart attack, and I've got 30-year-old young men calling me and asking me for help still. So this idea of being a leader never goes away. Key point here, you're going to be judged on how you lead in a crisis more than any other situation. So what we want to do and why this is important is we want to prepare for the crazy, anything and everything. I'd called this contingency plans in the past, but what we want to do then, and we can learn from an example of the Sandusky Scandal, is learn from these past experiences, real research on what to do or what not to do and how to do it better. And these case studies can help us improve in our leadership and crisis management. So what we can learn. How you define ethics is important. Make sure you go back to your ethics definition and keep it sound and simple, that you can communicate this to your staff and your athletes, and that can be used in a time of a crisis. Same thing with your definition of leadership. Make it real so that it can be applied and simple and consistent. You want to plan for how to apply your role as a manager. Again, preparing two extremes and kind of filling in the middle. Those are the contingencies plans. So you must plan for the good, obviously. That's the easy part, what most people do. But we've got to go all the way down to the bad and the ugly in your preparation as a leader. I like to do this as I pull up some different terms on ethics that I got with definitions from the class. And these are interesting. Maybe you could steal some ideas here, but obviously, character over reputation, John Wooden at the bottom is one of my favorites. Same thing with leadership. Always love this one in the red. With great power comes great responsibility. That's a Spider-Man quote, but maybe one of the best ones. So your leader's role, you can be proactive in crisis management. A couple steps here. Resolving conflict, what is your role? Study others and prepare for the worst here instead of the best. Focus on coaching your self. This is where you need to have those contingency plans. You want to be your own personality, but again, you have to decide, am I going to be more of a police person, just having a rule and following it, or am I going to be an educator and a counselor and be flexible in dealing with it, or are you going to be a little bit of both? Again, we can use other scandals like the Sandusky Scandal here at Penn State to learn from. And nobody is without flaws or situations that we can't learn from. An example is Ohio State, SMU death penalty, and Baylor basketball. Establishing expectations and standards. Again, we've talked about this right at the very beginning. We talked about our rewards and discipline system. And then lastly, accountability in the process for conflict. We don't want to think of these as laws, but you want to think of your format and your process as a way to educate and learn and grow, but you need documentation. So a model for ethical decisions, the first question to ask is, what is the ideal end? What are the objectives that do you want to achieve? And then it's good, again, to put some logic into this versus an emotional reaction and list your different options. Consider some different ethical guidelines. We showed earlier during ethics, Penn State has a great ethical decision-making wheel from the SMEO Business School also. It's another great example. You can employ ethical principles and theories then. And then last, make an objective ethical decision. Key point here is you need to eliminate emotion, but one of the other things we need to do is make sure you understand your own biases so that you can better deal with them. So here's a great crisis management kind of plan or steps. Step one is identify the ideal end, as we just said. List your options. Two, look at some ethical guidelines in which you're operating. What is the legal responsibilities you have within the organization you're working with? Step four, employ those ethical principles and theories. Hopefully you've done your research. And then five, identify your own bias and how it may affect the decision. So our new crisis process needs to be full disclosure, and as we've said all the way through, thinking safety first, legal second, and then your own leadership philosophy last. Now go back then and review what was your statement on the scandals, and can you follow these steps? And hopefully it helps. Last, why this is important, let's just take a look again. Like I said, it's kind of crazy out there, and sports not immune to that. So you can look at some coaches doing meltdowns. We can have a funny look at it, but hopefully your preparation in crisis management helps you avoid these. Thanks.